This is Horns Up. I'm Animesh.
And I'm Peter.
And on this episode, we're celebrating Atheist's Unquestionable Presence. It's one of my most favorite albums of all time. Peter, is it yours as well?
Oh, definitely, man. I mean, 100%. There's so much about this album that we can talk about. And I'm glad it's just two of us, honestly.
Alrighty. So the reason we are celebrating this album on today's episode, released 27th August 2021, is because the date coincides, well, kind of, with the 30th birthday of this landmark album's release. Yes, Unquestionable Presence was released on the 30th of August in 1991. It's the second album by the Florida-based band, and it features 8 songs that altogether run for around only 32 minutes. So, Peter, share your story, man. How, where, and when did you discover Atheist? And how, where, and when did you pop your Unquestionable Presence cherry?
I discovered Atheist at a time that I was kind of heavily into black metal. And it was like that lo-fi black metal. Everyone kind of gets the picture, right? So this was around 2005-06 when I was studying in Canada. And everyone kind of relates to the time then when you're a student, you have limited amount of money. So I was buying CDs like every couple of months after saving up. So in 2005, towards the end of the year, Relapse Records released the 3 Atheist albums on CD. And call it fate, call it chance, coincidence, whatever you want to call it. There was a secondhand store that I used to go to. I just happened to chance on Unquestionable Presence. And I consider it my lucky day because there's no way. And I'm just wondering who is the guy who sold a copy of Atheist Unquestionable Presence, right? And this was the remaster. It wasn't even like, the first press and all of that. But I had already read about it. I mean, all the metal magazines at that time were raving about, Atheist album finally coming into print. And also, I didn't even think twice about buying the album with whatever money I had at that time. And I can't remember because the CD store had this policy where basically you could actually listen to the album before buying it. I don't know if I actually did, because if I did, I would have just been like literally with my jaw open, like, what the fuck is this kind of thing, right? And but what I do very clearly remember is I used to always roam around with my CD player, is immediately putting the CD into my CD player that I had. And I think for months, I just walked around listening to that, trying to comprehend, because there's just so much happening in there, right? And
yeah,
the beautiful part about the reissue is it not only has the 8 songs, it also has the pre-production demos and all of that, which, for a collector and someone who really enjoys it, it's kind of cool to listen to. But and the thing about the album is I realize, and it's even now, right, that you keep listening to it, you always come across one part where you're just like, whoa, this is so cool. I didn't hear this. But you know what? I'm going to stop now. I can go on and on talking about the album. So that's my story for now. What about you, Animesh? Tell us yours.
Okay, so long-time listeners would know that the bands that got me into metal were Iron Maiden, Megadeth, and Metallica. No fucking surprises there, right? And then, of course, came Slayer and Death. And it's around that time that I decided to try and learn guitar. And after spending some time with the instrument, I discovered tabs, and thus began the journey of spending hours upon hours of practicing guitar in my bedroom, trying to play songs that were simply put too awesome and too complex for me to fathom. One of the most challenging tracks for me was The Flesh and the Power It Holds, and I just couldn't wrap my head around it. What does this have to do with Atheist? Patience, dear Peter, patience. Now, this is also the time of Rediff chat rooms. Do you remember that? I remember logging on and asking vaguely. I remember logging on and asking if any guitarists were into Death, right? So that they could help me figure out Flesh and the Power It Holds. Someone answered and we got chatting, and after talking about the song, the dude typed out, "Hey, if you're into this technical thing, check out Atheist." I said I would, and then promptly went back to struggling with Flesh. Naturally, a few days later, I typed in Atheist into a search engine, and boom, no results about a technical metal band. Of course, like I wasn't stupid, so better sense prevailed, and I typed in atheist metal band, and lo and behold, that's how I got to know about atheist. One thing led to another, and I downloaded a torrent of Mother Man somehow. I was floored. I mean, this wasn't technical, right? Like, this wasn't just technical. This sounded to my untrained ears like just schizophrenia of sorts unleashed onto tape as such. And immediately, the very first listen, my mind was abuzz with questions like, is this jazz? Is this metal? Why are there birds chirping in the background? Why is the bass the instrument that's driving this song? It isn't conventional. Who are these guys? It's atheist, but this doesn't sound evil. Why are they named atheist? Are they buddies with DI side? Do they know them? Etc. etc. Because I didn't know about the scenes and stuff at that point in time either. Immediately, of course, I tried to learn the song and I gave up in say maybe a couple of hours itself. It was way too fucking complex for me. I just couldn't wrap my head around it. Tried searching for the album, couldn't find a seed. Played Mother Man over and over again and tried to talk to the limited friend circle who were into metal that I knew as such about Atheist and about Mother Man, and nobody had anything new to add as such. So it was only like a few years later that I somehow found a tape of Unquestionable Presence at Hero Music, bought it, and then managed to hear the
Wow.
whole album.
Of
And
all places, Hero
exactly,
Music.
right? There were only three stores, right, in Bombay where you could find good metal or rare metal music. One was Rhythm House, one was Planet M, and that too only the VT branch.
BT was, yeah, for sure.
And yeah, and then the third was Hero Music, who I don't know how he kept this album, but he did.
Yeah.
And what followed since then, well, that's the reason as such, as to why we are talking about this album today. Alrighty, so Unquestionable Presence holds a very special place in the hearts of most atheist fans, as you would have realized, and that also has to do with the lineup, right? Because this album introduces bassist Tony Choi, and the reason for the same isn't the typical lineup change of sorts. The band's original bassist and founding member Roger Patterson died in a touring van accident before the studio sessions for Unquestionable could begin. Patterson himself was kind of a bass wonder kid, and losing him was a devastating blow to the band, and I think to music in general, right? Like, imagine if he had been around and stuck around and maybe been the driving force for the band, just how Burton was to Metallica,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So Patterson, here's the cool thing though, he'd already written most of the parts for Unquestionable Presence, or the songs that were coming onto this album. And thankfully, as you said, you can still hear them on the demos for this album. But I view this lineup change of sorts as a bittersweet thing, for it led the band to Tony Choi, who's just as good, if not even better, at least to my tastes, or for my tastes, and who'd already been part of another fucking tastic band, Cynic, which is a band that we need to talk about and do another of these kind of an episodes about at a future point in time, right?
100% for sure. I'll just add a quick thing about Cynic, right? Is I was looking up videos of atheist online, and there's a video that Sean Malone has taken of them rehearsing Unquestionable Presence. So you can watch those like old school, video cam footage. And in there, you've got, so it's Sean Malone shooting it. You've got Paul Masvidal sitting, just chilling out, all of them in like, shoulder length long hair. And you just see Tony Choi like ripping it on the bass. Oh my God. I think like, I'm not a bass player. Even remotely, I don't like enjoy that. But I think when you're going to see it, you're going to have like a complete different experience. So I'm going to link you to that post this. But
Thanks so much.
so apart from Tony Choi, there's no change to the Atheist lineup. I mean, you've got Kelly Schiffer on vocals and lyrics, Randy Burke on guitars, and Steve Flynn handles the sticks and skins. Oh my God, I'm gonna like be talking a lot about him because apart from the bass, the drums is such a huge element of this album, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what stays the same is the producer or recording engineer. And he is somebody, I think, 1991 death metal meant only one person, Scott Burns. So he returns as the man responsible for recording this album for Atheist as well.
Absolutely.
People who've heard the last episode will also know that he's the person who recorded the Cannibal Corpse album. So what a year he had, huh? I mean, 1991.
Superb, yeah. I wonder how many royalties he collects only for working on those specific albums.
I think that's a whole separate discussion that we could
We
have.
should do a 30-year kind of a catch up or something with Scott Burns.
Yeah, there's something I'm not gonna reveal right now, but yeah, there's something at the end of this episode I have about Scott Burns. All right, so that's everything about the album. It's time to actually get to the songs. So let's start off with the first one, Mother Man. Go for it, Animesh.
Fuck, what an album opener, right? Now, here's the thing, because I was so enthralled and trying to learn this song, eventually what I discovered was when I got to the tabs that, I could vary the speed of the tab. And so I decided to learn how to try and play this song, especially when I got the bass, by slowing it down to 3/4 speed. And because I was practicing with that or with that pace as such, I think this sounds this song sounds better at 3/4 speed. Try it if you try it if you haven't already tried it. Right, just slow down Mother Man a bit and listen to it. It becomes so much more heavier. But the original song itself, I'm just blown away by the speed. I mean, it's it's just so much to wrap your head around, right? The technical chops, the ferocity, the aggressiveness, excellent performances by everyone, especially Tony Choi. In addition to Patterson's parts, improvised and played, a lot more of tapping and introduced a lot more of tapping elements, etc., into that songwriting style or into the bass playing style as such. And immediately, what catches your attention is Schaefer's distinct vocal style. This is death metal style vocals. That's a prelude as such to a thought that I've been pondering about Unquestionable Presence and Atheist as such, which we'll also discuss at the very end. So, Peter, what about you? What did you think about Mother Man?
Dude, what a fucking album opener. I mean, like, I still remember listening to the track for the first time and going exactly like what the hell is happening here, right? Just putting into context the whole thing that I've been listening to a lot of black metal, where you've got like those high pitched, screechy kind of guitars in there. And the bass, if it exists, is like barely there. Here you have the bass leading it on. I mean, like, if you think about it, and this is again my untrained musician, you've literally got the bass leading, playing like the main riffs, and then
Yep.
the guitar is trying to catch up to there. And
Yep.
just like at the start of the song, right, if you have to break it up, you've got the way the bass and the drums are locked in. I mean, like, everyone will talk about, Roger Patterson and all, but I think someone who's played a great co-supporting and equal role, I wouldn't say even like a supporting role, is like Stephen Flynn, right? The way he kind of joins in, and it's so tastefully done. So I'm going to like highlight a few parts later on in there. And then while you have all that bass in the start, then you have the guitars like kind of playing and so seamlessly kind of fitting in, right? It's, I mean, like when you listen to it, it's, and I'm trying to think of like the guys in 91 listening to it. I mean, imagine you had that and then you had the Cynic album. You're just like, what the fuck is happening, right? Like, what are these guys listening to and all? And of all places, these guys are also from Florida, right? Where most of like these really brutal and heavy bands are coming out from. But you've got like the tasty, as I've put it, solo trading happening in the middle of the track.
Mm-hmm.
And just the last minute, I mean, I think if you take the amount of riffs that are there in that first song itself, it's probably like if you take any of the other bands, they could like make an entire album from there, right? There's just
Yeah,
so
definitely
much
an
going
EP.
on.
Yep.
Yeah, there's so much happening. I mean, just unwrapping your head around what you just heard is a task in itself. You're just, and especially for like somebody who's not heard anything prior to this like it. Like if you've heard like say Cynic, and for me, I had not even heard Piece of Time, right? This is the
Mm-hmm.
first time I'm hearing of any material by Atheist.
Likewise.
So, damn man, what a way to kind of get introduced to the band.
But what really got to me was the samples at the end of the bird chirping, etc. I was like, wow, man, this is yeah. It left me speechless, and till to this date, I find, like, because of the samples, I find Mother Man, weirdly enough, one of the most soothing songs in this metal genre or sorts. Whatever.
Yeah,
Let's.
like what happens is that whole pull and push that happens in there, right? It's not just like pure out aggression. There's these parts where you feel in there, and then suddenly, so that whole thing I really enjoy, and I think that's what keeps you going, right? Because there's so many dynamics in the song, right? It's not like straight anything, right? Either too brutal or too chill, right? It's got a mix of both that messes with you.
Absolutely. And you take that structure, you take that formula, you take that pattern, and you try to comprehend it. And then after Mother Man, obviously you are hoping for more. And the next track, which is Unquestionable Presence, definitely delivers, because to Mother Man, I mean, if you think of a band name like Atheist, right, especially when you're a kid, it would denote something evil, or sinister at least. And Mother Man doesn't sound like that, but Unquestionable Presence, fuck, now that track sounds sinister. This track sounds like it's definitely by a band called Atheist. Um, Speaking of some of the highlights as such, I love the riff that forms the rhythm track to Berkey's first solo, and then the song completely changes right in the second half, and that's when it really pummels you with its technical wizardry, no?
Oh yeah, man, that solo, like, and that's the thing, right? The solos are not one of those like, hey, I can play a solo, check me out, I'm showing off and all of that. It's just there. It's there for the right amount of time, makes its presence known, and it's then leads into something even more, right? So that was like the really cool thing I like about almost all the solos
Mm-hmm.
on this album, that they're not like, and that I think that's where I'm going to kind of keep repeating this also, is this is between Piece of Time and this album, right? You've seen the band really mature, and it takes like four guys who are very chill and okay with each other, right? No
Yeah.
one's trying to kind of overpower each other. Like the guitarists don't have that thing that, oh, why is the bass leading? They know that, hey, this guy knows his shit. He's really, we have to keep up with him, right? So that's where I feel it comes. Yeah, dude, that opening intro, right? That I mean, before it goes nuts, that really creeps you out, and especially the way it kind of segues from the previous song, right? You
Mm-hmm.
have the birds chirping, then you have this kind of ominous intro, and then it just all goes nuts after the first minute, and you're just like, oh my god, what the hell is this? I mean, if anyone has to ask me, like, hey, which is by far your, like, put a gun to my head and say which is your favorite Atheist track, this one will come on top for sure, man.
Strong pick.
Yeah.
Mine's definitely Mother Man. I've just got too much history with that song.
Fair enough. All right. On to the third track, Your Life's Retribution.
Yeah, what I really love about this track is that it lets Tony Choi shine right out at the very front. And there's that fabulous, like, new wave of British heavy metal or Bay Area thrash, depending on whatever you're listening to. You'll immediately recognize it. It's such a metal staple at this point. There's so much of love thrown at that kind of thought as such during the solo section. I absolutely love that section. That to me is the, like, proper highlight as such of this song.
Yeah, and coming back again, like this is where I on this track I feel like Steve Flynn, he adds like these really interesting fills through
Mm-hmm.
the song, which if you like listen on a good pair of headphones, which clearly I wasn't back then, I completely missed out, right? But now when I'm listening back to it, he just adds in there, and it's those little pops and little things that he adds in there that makes this song really complete. I mean, if you take that out, and that's what I feel about this album, if you take out even one element or one bit, it
Mm-hmm.
feels empty, right? You'll
Absolutely.
realize in there. So
Yep.
it's just so well, man. Can you imagine what a mind fuck it would have been to mix this album?
I don't think it would have been. I think it's been it's been produced really well, because essentially what they've done is they've isolated frequencies for each instrument as such, and just let them, and just basically push them to the max so that each instrument shines. Everything just gels so well
Yeah,
together and
yeah,
still sounds unique, if you were to just listen to it in its own layers as such. And yeah, so yeah, that was your life's retribution, and let's move on to track number 4, which is Enthralled in Essence, which to me is my second favorite song of this album, because what a mammoth of a fucking introduction that is to the track. The opening riffs are
yeah.
awesome, and especially what I really love about it, and this is the cheesiness coming out, it is that vocal hit, which is not just a vocal hit, but all the instruments hitting together, right? That is how you transition for a groove. I've repeatedly tried to get something like that done, and finally, like, we managed to do it for one of the Riot Peddler songs. Obviously, that's like hardcore punk, and this is like uh, progressive and shit. But yeah, when you nail that kind of a thing together as a band, it immediately just lifts the energy in the room, because you're all like, holy shit, we're actually doing this, and we're doing this together. Also, I have to mention, what a fucking awesome crescendo, right? It all builds in. It feels like you have troops coming in and charging into battle, and that is one of the most enjoyable parts of the entire album, um, as such for me. I also love the fact that we can finally hear some different dynamics as such from Kelly Schaefer's vocals itself, especially with that "in a past lifetime I feel I've had mine" Walla line. Yeah, I fucking love this song too.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, if you think about it, these were guys just out of their teens at that time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like he's writing such like introspective, philosophical kind of stuff. So there's more of that in there. But talk to me about the part, which is that little head banging part, which I've called it at like 220, like jen, 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 and then suddenly that screeching solo, which is a very different solo compared to like I have kind of tagged it as the heavy metalist solo because it goes like,
Exactly. Yep.
and you expect that, right?
Yeah, that's exactly the crescendo wala part that I was talking about. It's
Yeah,
it's fucking awesome, man.
yeah, and there's so much. Like the thing is, it basically takes, and I know we're going to debate this there, but it takes everything about me- death metal, and just kind of like breaks all those stereotypes, right? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, you think you know what metal is? Wait, listen. And I think that's the way I want to challenge people. Let's like just mess with them. Like, hey, have you heard this track? This is a metal band, that. But all right, that was Enthralled in an Essence. On to the next one, An Incarnation's Dream. I think the first minute of the track
Mm-hmm.
is by far the most like relaxed or chill on the album, right? Everything else kind of is there.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, the highlights are, that bass breakdown at like the second bit. That
Yeah.
kind of is there. And then the build up at which is towards the end of the track, which is about three
Yeah.
minute 50, which just repeats. So the first time you hear it, it's nice. The second time when they replay that entire whole bit, right, with all of them kind of coming, which to me, and this is the only way I've kind of heard it in other music, is like it forms sort of like a jugalbandi, right, with all the instruments kind of coming. It's so beautiful. For me, that like is also one of the highlights of the track.
Yeah, you mentioned the introduction. I mean, that just doesn't prepare you for the onslaught or the second half as such of this entire song, because you're in the introduction. I don't think you would be expecting that to kick up those many several notches higher. I mean, for me, this track and Incarnation's Dream, it's as complex and as strong as Mother Man in terms of the progressive elements, and in terms of how the sections have been laid out, and in terms of how complex those sections are itself, and the pace of the entire thing too. I mean, I get that this track introduces side B of the album, but I would have no problem if this track would be the album opener itself, right? Because it's got everything that you would want in an Atheist song. It's such a well defining number as such for what Atheist is supposed to be on Unquestionable Presence. And yes, as you said, I love that groovy breakdown, man. It's chuggable, for lack of a better word. It gets you to move away from overthinking all of this and analyzing all of this to just sure enjoying all of this. That's what I love about this track, as well as Motherman, as well as um, Enthralled in Essence. It's so dynamic, so complex, but at the same time, it's so enjoyable. You don't get like, there's no like wankery here. I mean, yes,
Yeah,
it's all
yeah.
technical wankery, but at the same point in time, this is wankery with class, right?
Like not certain bands that played like 10-minute songs.
Forget 10-minute songs. I mean, if you enjoy wankery, then you enjoy wankery. But yeah, whatever. Uh, this isn't wankery. This is like, okay, there's a technique here. There is some sort of, like, okay, I will do this in this manner, and thus I will be able to not just increase pleasure for me, but also increase pleasure for the listener.
which I think we should talk about towards the end. Like, did it really? But let's move on to the next track.
Yep, the next track is The Formative Years. That's track number 6. This one is just sheer relentless. I mean, it carries on all the aspects as such that we've heard in the previous 5 tracks. And by now, if you're listening to this track, you will definitely realize that, hey, you need to return to this album and, maybe go track by track, or maybe go slower than usual, or like, get a vinyl and like, play it at like half speed, or get it onto Audacity or whatever and just slow it down to be able to appreciate each and every element and all the nuances as such. It's that strong, man. It's awesome. What
Yeah.
do you think?
Yeah, I mean, for me, like the lyrics, right? When I was looking it up, it's so profound. Like I talked earlier,
Mm-hmm.
right? Is like if you see, he says, like, in the short time that I've spent here in this ghastly plane, I've come to find there are so many things that should be
Should
changed.
yeah.
Like the relationship between the elder and the youth. It lights the fuse that leads to all our problems, and that's the truth. I mean, like, you think about it, right? For somebody who's just out of their teens or like a young adult, this is really profound stuff. So this guy is like really thinking a lot. I love the solo, which is like around 1.5 minute or so, and even right after that, the drum fills, man. I think, like for me, I was paying a lot of attention to the drums this time around because
Mm-hmm.
you know how good the album sounds. Everyone knows about the bass and riffs, but like I said, right, each time you listen to it, you discover
Of course.
something
Yep.
new. And for me, with the last listen I had, it's been the drums.
Mm-hmm.
So that was The Formative Years. Now we're on to Brains.
What's really surprising is, this late into the album, 6 songs done, 2 songs to go, you're expecting some kind of like, palette cleanser of sorts, or something to just slow things down. But Brains is not that track. It's really surprising that there's no let up whatsoever. Yes, you're used to the patterns as such for structuring the songs here, but there's still so much of wiggle room, right? I mean, it's not like a Rage Against the Machine kind of an approach where you take a playbook and then you stick absolutely to that playbook as such in terms of how you want to structure your songs. Everything is just, moving in and transitioning at its own sweet pace, and as such as to what that section needs for the transition, and not what the song structure playbook or anything of that sort is. I have to say, and that, like, there's this bass fill which comes in just around the time of the mini drum solo that happens, right? That and plus there's this track Brains. It has this really cool groove that's probably the most headbangerish kind of a section in this entire album. It just, I mean, you couldn't have written that kind of a section if you didn't want the audience, or you didn't want yourself to just, give that feeling to the audience that, what, yes, this is complicated shit, and you may not be able to headbang to it all the time, but here you go, take a bone, play with it. This is your time to shine. Yeah, that's why Brains is so fucking cool as a track.
Yeah, and you think like this late in the album, the band would probably throw in like filler tracks, right? This album has no fillers at this point.
Absolutely
You
not.
clearly realize. I love the bass part at the 1 minute mark.
Mm-hmm.
The solo again in there, and what's cool about this track is it starts with the same kind of twisted riffs that it ends, right? So that these guys are not like leaving anything that these riffs let's use on another song or something. These guys are just like at it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such a ferocious track, man. I mean, I really like you. What surprised me and always surprises me is that these guys are just like, what, let's put everything out there. And like Brains could have been like on another album for all it mattered, right? But no,
Yeah.
they decided to keep it on this album itself.
Yeah, this could have been album's opener, album single as such for every other album too.
Yeah.
It's that strong. It's that strong of a track. And finally, we come to the end of the album as such, and with the song, the eighth track called "And the Psychic Saw." I love that folky, jazzy, whatever
Yeah.
you want to call it, right? I don't even have a word for it as such. There's that midsection which comes in just before the solo. What the fuck was that? Why?
Yeah.
How does it fit so well into what is supposed to be a metal album, right? And here's the thing, it's that part is so different from everything else, but then you have these simple pentatonic guitar riffs towards the end of the song that again form kind of a highlight because it allows or it sets the base for Choi and Flynn to completely annihilate everybody in their path as such with their performances. This was just like, I think this was like programmed as the last track as such, because they basically just gave free reign to Choi and Flynn and said, dudes, do your thing, man. Push this thing even further than what we want it to be.
I mean, I call that like a jammy part which just kind of like repeats itself. But dude, what the hell? I mean, like, and that's the thing, right? When I'm trying to think, like, I never heard it on tape, but can you imagine, like, if you like went all the way till the end, and then you're like, okay, wait, I have to rewind this track. What the fuck just happened? Like, what am I hearing?
Dude, so I had discovered that, in Walkmans, because Walkmans were powered by simple AA batteries, right? If you insert new batteries into my Walkman, at least that's what it did for me, everything would play like at a slightly faster
Yes.
speed than
Oh,
usual.
yeah.
And if the batteries had almost passed, like had their energy removed, whatever, everything would just slow down.
Yeah.
So for this particular album, I remember taking batteries and essentially just wasting them so that I could get them to be drained out, so that I could insert that and then listen to some of the songs here. And I did that especially with "And the Psychic Saw." I remember doing that still.
That's such a. I do remember because you'd hear like some of these up tempo tracks suddenly just like whoa,
Exactly,
and then
man.
you
That
knew
was
like,
the
how, okay, that's
yeah,
a sign.
yeah. And just by the way, has anybody ever tried editing the Mortal Kombat theme to the end of this track? Obviously, because of the gong,
Yeah.
which was such a stupid way to end. Like that to me is probably the most stupid thing done on this album.
It's like Finn.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh God. I think, you know what? Honestly, we've spent more time talking about this album than the actual album length, right? So those were the 8 tracks on the album. Now, Animesh, I have a simple but probably tough question for you, which is, what makes this album great?
All that we've said in the last God knows, ever since this episode began, is kind of just fodder as such to help compile this an answer to this kind of a question. But outright, of course, first and foremost, it has to be the musicianship right here. It's super high quality. It's breaking boundaries. It's a mix of technicality and progression that's so far I don't think had been executed at this level for this genre as such in this manner. And yet, and this is what I was talking about, right? Even though it is so complex, at the same time it's easy to listen to, right? We talked about wankery and all of that jazz, and it's almost as if everything's being passed through a dumbed down filter which makes it accessible as such to the listener, which is a reflection of true songwriting genius. I mean, it also shows massive respect as such, or at least that's the way I put it. I don't know the inner story, but I would think that all the musicians on this album truly respect one another and are okay to give them their own individual space.
Oh yeah, totally agree. I mean, like that's what I was saying, right? While I was watching that video in the start, right? You just see all of them kind of getting their own space in their own thing, doing their thing. And can you imagine, like, this came in a place like Florida, which is like, humid, oppressive heat. I mean, we kind of understand it because we live in a similar kind of space here in Bombay, right? But
Yeah.
what I really like about this album, it till date blows my mind just like it did the first time I heard it. Because is
Yeah.
it jazz? Is it metal? Like, there was this whole fusion metalish thing. And, coming back to what you said, and that's where I was coming from also in terms of the mix, right? Because typically you have like a particular member sign is saying that, okay, I'll decide what it should sound like and all. Here it's like literally I feel all these guys were chilled out and like, no man, I think you know what's best, or you go ahead. Like, it just seems like a very calm thing. And overall, Scott Burnt has done such a great job, because I think this kind of sets a standard, right? I mean,
It does.
we talked on our previous episode of him mixing the Cannibal Corpse album. I mean, can you imagine him like a few months recording with Cannibal Corpse and mixing that, then coming down to this? Like, for this would have been like, okay, this is my palate cleanser. Who's next? Obituary? Deicide? Who's coming next? Like, I need more brutality now. But yeah, man, I mean, it's such a beautiful album that 30 years later we can go on and on about it, honestly.
Yep. And here's the thing, right? Yes, the musicianship is at such a high level, and lyrically, it's not bad at all. I mean, each song is covering a new topic, whether it be conserving nature as such on Mother Man, or personal ruminations, or just existential questions. It's not your stereotypical thrash or death that even the audience in 991 was used to as such. It kind of goes against the grain of what is popular metal at that time. And sure, it may not be like absolute poetic genius, but the fact that at that age Kelly Sheffer was able to write this, wow, that shows some virtuosity, some genius at that level too. And you know what? Here are a couple of other points too as to why Unquestionable Presence is such a fucking awesome album. It's designed as an album, right? There's this natural flow between the eight tracks. You can't take away one of the songs in the middle, and the entire album will suffer. The most enjoyable thing, or one of the most enjoyable things about this album, is that it's just 32 minutes long. Super efficient, man. Not a note and not a second feel wasted, and it's perfect for those moments when you're craving a piece of music but you don't really have a lot of time. You get to listen to an entire album filled with fabulous songs from right from the start to the end, and it's just 32 minutes long. How many other albums do you know that manage to do that? What's also weird is that I've never been able to have this album on in the background as such, and so whenever I do listen to it, it always just draws attention towards itself, and you have to keep on, like, you have to concentrate on this. It You can make that work for you too, because listening to this album, it always gives me kind of an energy. It's like it makes for the musical equivalent of an early morning drink to really wake you up, because it makes your brain will want to start to figure out what the hell you're listening to. It'll get your neurons firing as such.
Yeah, man, totally. I can totally see that. I mean, I love, like, this is the kind of stuff you want to listen to when you wake up, because it's not like too brutal or too heavy.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, it's not like, and it doesn't seem like, the thing I like about this compared to a lot of the sterile technical death metal, right? This is not like, it's so much easier to listen to. At this point, you're just like, like trying to cram as many notes as possible
Exactly.
in
Yeah.
all of that, or who's going to be faster, more brutal, more heavy. It, I mean, I think that's where they also kind of had overall the perception, right? Because it was released in 1991, and that we're talking about a lot of albums recently in 1991, right? It was such a strange time in metal.
Absolutely. I mean, there's no doubt about the fact that Unquestionable Presence is definitely an influential album, because you kind of know that half of today's tech, prog, whatever bands who want to try and play this kind of music, they wouldn't really exist if this album had not been released earlier. Sure, everything on this album can be improved, and a lot of bands have tried to do that, but yeah, a lot of bands haven't been able to do that to the degree that Atheists themselves have been able to do on Unquestionable Presence. Um, so, Peter, now I have a question for you, right? I think all of what we spoke easily kind of gives you enough, and then some more as such, to understand why this album is so great and why we are fanboying about it. But the question for you, Peter, is Unquestionable Presence the strongest Atheist album?
No doubt in my mind, of course, man. So this was the first Atheist album I heard, and
Mm-hmm.
it was for me like, really special. Then I went into Piece of Time. I was told to avoid Elements for the longest time.
Mm-hmm.
I'll come to that in a second. But yeah, Jupiter, I think if you keep aside the fact that, it's a comeback album from Atheist and all, Jupiter on its own was a very good album. But then, you always compare the comeback album to their best album. I mean, like a band like Carcass also faces the same problem, right? Oh my God, is this a strong enough comeback? Why are they not gone brutal? Blah, blah, blah. I think Jupiter on its own stands, but then when you compare it to Unquestionable Presence, no, man, you can't at all compare it. Elements, I don't know. Like, it took me a long time. I finally heard it. I kind of warmed up to it. It sounds like an Atheist album,
Uh huh.
but if you follow, if that's an album following up Unquestionable Presence, nah. So yeah, just to come back, of course, man, this is unquestionably the best Atheist album.
Absolutely, it has the Unquestionable Presence. This is the album to hear as such from Atheist. There's no, absolutely right. There's no doubt about that either. I definitely enjoy Elements. That comes in as a strong second, close second for me. I enjoyed Jupiter as well. I thought that album was really good, especially for a return album of sorts. Or, and as you rightly said, even if you remove that lens, it was just one of the best albums released in that year. And still, I keep listening to Jupiter too. I've never enjoyed really Piece of Time, but I don't know why. I've never seemed to enjoy it. But yeah, absolutely doesn't dispute the place or the position or the presence of Unquestionable Presence at the top of the pile for Atheist albums as such. Remember at the very beginning, like while we were chatting, Mother Man, there was this thought about whether this is death metal as such. What do you think, Peter? Is this death metal?
I've always struggled with this fact that the band is tagged as technical death metal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I get that, okay, if you take like most of the current bands, they've all been influenced by them, and they've taken the sound forward and all. But if you take even the 1991 lens of death metal, right? You had bands like Cannibal Corpse around, you had bands like Deicide around, Obituary. There were so many. I mean, yes, it has some elements of death metal, but for me, the biggest thing that it's missing out is the growled vocals, right? Which is, I feel, an essential part of death metal. Just those, Cookie Monster vocals or whatever you want to call them. So I wouldn't tag this band as death metal, to be honest. Like, if I had to introduce it to somebody today, I would say that, this is a progressive band or a technical band in there. But then again, see, that's the thing, right? Technical is also in 2021 far different, right? People expect it progressive or technical as more wankery. This is still one of those bands. So I would still say, like, I mean, I don't know. Would you call it thrash?
I
I
definitely would call it thrash. I mean, it's more thrash than it is death, because think about it. The instruments, yes, they are mastered in sort of a death metal kind of a way, right? They have that kind of sonic template as such, or that sonic palette on it. But at the same time, if you were to hear this live with slightly thrashier tones, obviously with the bass pushed way up in that mix, etc., this is thrash metal. It's technical thrash. Yes, it's progressive thrash, but it is thrash. Schaefer's vocal style, I think, is the only thing that makes this slightly death as such, because it's not easily understandable, of course, right? Like most thrash bands still would be, you would easily be able to comprehend what's being said, not over here. So I think that's the only element of sorts that kind of qualifies it towards death. And yes, of course, if you are into brutal death metal, as you rightly said, then it's still not heavy enough, which is weird to say. Now, I find Jupiter heavier than this as an album, but of course, Unquestionable Presence is the one that leaves you perplexed by its sheer virtuosity, and you'll want to come back and listen to this one over and over again, to just kind of still try and figure it out as such. Speaking of which, what the fucking hell is up with Relapse? Or rather, what the hell is up with this album's availability on Apple Music? It's disappeared. I discovered that while I was trying to listen to this album again, and it's no longer there. So of course, I had to dig out my old CD, which definitely is a bootleg, and it only has a front cover and a back cover, black and white Xerox, of course, of it. Yeah, but I think I definitely now need to try and fish out and get the remastered on CD, because all of the fucking songs were available on streaming earlier.
yeah, and that was, I also was scratching my head while getting ready for this episode. I mean, I looked up Spotify, so I was like, okay, Spotify India, whatever, there must be some issue. I went to Amazon Music. Amazon Music, it's not there. And I could have sworn till like a couple of weeks ago they were on Seasons of Mist Bandcamp, because right now,
Ooh,
as of last night, they are available on, as you can buy it, but the tracks you cannot play.
exactly.
So I did a little digging, and I
Mm-hmm.
went to the band's Facebook. And if you see their Facebook or you see their YouTube, there are fans just like us going like, when is your music? Why is your music off streaming? When is it coming back? So the band actually replied saying, switching our catalog to a new label, big things to come. Sorry for the inconvenience. Now I was like, okay, wait, they announced a new label and I didn't know about this. So I again looked up news about the band, and of Wikipedia of all pages, there was an announcement that in 2018, the band signed a worldwide deal with Agonia Records, and they're supposed to also, they put up a couple of things on Instagram and Twitter and all, that they're touring early next year. So that's as far as this is concerned. I don't know if they're still with Agonia, but that was quite interesting for me, because I was like, how do you kind of just take off all? Because I know the deal with Relapse is over. That's why all of the stuff was on Season of Mist. But when it went off Season of Mist, like the only place you can actually hear it right now on the internet is
YouTube.
YouTube. Yeah, YouTube of all places. So for those of you who are missing it, maybe like, I don't know, be creative, but I think that's the only place it'll be for some time, or I don't know, maybe they'll take it down. I have no idea.
Thanks for doing all the detective work, of course. But the only silver lining in all in this kind of an answer on this story is the fact that definitely there seems to be some sort of activity that's happening in the atheist camp, right? I mean, you have these kind of posts which hopefully signal that a move to a new record label will also bring with it a new record. Yeah, I hope there's more to that.
Yeah, another thing I actually found, which is kind of cool in their Facebook posts and all, is that Kelly posted about a new band called Till the Dirt. And that's something that he's written in the last year during the pandemic. So, one of the silver linings of the pandemic. And the clip they posted off the track, which is, it's not a track, I mean, a full track, it's just like a 30-second, sounded quite interesting. Now, here's the fact about Scott Burns that comes in, right? Is that their album, which is Outside the Spiral, is actually being produced by Scott Burns. So, wow, like what a reunion of sorts, right?
The band is coming back together.
The boys are back. I can hear the boys are back in town.
I hope so. And here's the thing, right? Like, I was really hoping that we would be able to do this by talking to Kelly Schaefer, but clearly, despite the numerous emails, etc., he clearly has better things to do. Maybe we'll be able to talk to him soon, or if not, we'll definitely keep trying. And I hope he gets to listen to this, because this to me was basically a love note as such to one of the best albums of all time.
Kelly, please reply to these emails from these two boys in Bombay. We love you.
I know, right? Final point, I have to talk merchandise here because, hey, it's Atheist. Finally, and I must give a big shout out to Salman and Rock and Roll Originals. Finally, thank you so much for bringing Atheist merchandise to India. I found it super weird that even bootleg merchandisers in India, they would stock like Cannibal Corpse and like Benighted, and hell, I've seen Vader t-shirts, etc. I've never been able to find an Atheist t-shirt in India earlier.
So I was really lucky. I think that this is the two lucky things I've had with Atheist, right? First was buying the Unquestionable Presence CD at a secondhand CD store. But I must thank Ulf from Metal Masala. So when he had just started his store online, which was still buggy and all of that, I was checking it out, and I chanced upon an Atheist Piece of Time t-shirt. And at that time, I think there was issues with the payment gateway or something. So I was like, okay, no, please book this t-shirt for me. I'll transfer the money to you. And oh my God, like for me, it was like a huge deal. Like, oh my God, in India, I managed to get an Atheist t-shirt. So I know exactly what you're talking about. And now that Rock and Roll Originals and Salman and all have like more, so I think it's time I get more than one Atheist t-shirt in my closet.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. That's what I'm planning to do as well. So that's it for Horns Up this week. Yes, it's an episode completely celebrating one of the albums that we love, Atheist's Unquestionable Presence. Now, next week, we're going to try to do something different. All I can say is, at this point in time, it will be time to up the irons. If you want to take a guess at what we are up to, hit us up. We are at hornsupod.com and on Twitter at hornsupod. As always, I'm on Twitter at Asmoani.
And I'm at Trend Crusher.
This was Horns Up.
Horns Up, guys.